Maybe you're tired of waiting, tired of watching plans fall apart just when you thought things were finally coming together. Tired of seeing everyone else move forward while your life feels stuck. And maybe, in the quietest moments, you wonder if something's wrong with you. If you missed your chance, if you're somehow behind. But what if there's something you were never taught? A truth the Buddha discovered 2,500 years ago that changes everything about how you see timing, about waiting, about why some things haven't happened yet. What if every delay you've experienced, every door that closed, every plan that fell apart, every not yet that broke your heart, wasn't random? Not because the universe planned it, but because reality itself works through causes and conditions. And when you understand how, everything shifts. Get ready. For the next 3 hours, you're not watching a video. You're stepping into an exploration that could change how you meet every moment of your life. If it feels right, share where you're listening from, your city, what time of day it is. Let's create something rare, a quiet moment of global connection. Now find somewhere safe, dim the lights, wrap yourself in something soft. Let the world outside wait. Because what you're about to discover isn't just ancient wisdom, it's the key to transforming how you experience waiting itself. Not by making things arrive faster, but by ending the war between where you are and where you think you should be. You're here because something brought you here. Conditions aligned. Your exhaustion, your hope, this moment. Everything that happens next begins right here. Let's begin. There's a teaching the Buddha shared 2,500 years ago that might be the most practical thing you hear today. It's called the teaching of the 2 arrows. And once you understand it, you'll never see your suffering the same way again. Imagine you're walking through a forest. Suddenly, an arrow flies out of nowhere and strikes you in the shoulder. It hurts. The pain is immediate, sharp, undeniable. This is the first arrow, the actual event that happens to you. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most of us, after being struck by that first arrow, immediately pick up a second arrow and shoot ourselves with it. We do this by asking, "Why me? This isn't fair. I don't deserve this. What did I do wrong?" That second arrow, that's the suffering we create through our resistance to what already happened. And here's the truth that might set you free. While you can't always avoid the first arrow, the second one is completely optional. Let me tell you about Sarah. Not her real name, but her story is real. 3 years ago, she was supposed to catch a flight to interview for her dream job. She'd been preparing for months. This was the opportunity she'd been waiting for her entire career. She left early, planned everything perfectly. But the universe had different conditions in motion that day. An accident on the highway. Traffic stopped completely. She watched the minutes tick by, watched her departure time pass, watched her dreams slip away while sitting in a car that wouldn't move. The first arrow had struck. She missed her flight. That was painful enough. But then came the second arrow, the one she shot herself with. For weeks, she replayed that morning. She should have left earlier. She should have taken a different route. She should have checked traffic reports more carefully. The missing of the flight hurt, but the resistance to having missed it, that's what was destroying her. Here's what she didn't know then. 6 months later, a colleague who had taken a position at that company called her. The company was imploding. Toxic leadership, layoffs coming, people jumping ship. The job she'd mourned not getting would have derailed her career and devastated her mental health. Was this destiny? No, the universe didn't plan this to protect her. That's not how Buddhism understands reality. What happened was this: causes and conditions. The accident that caused the traffic had its own causes. Perhaps someone was distracted. Perhaps a tire blew. Perhaps weather played a role. Those causes had causes. Everything connected. Everything arising from what came before. The company's problems existed before her interview. Those conditions were already in motion. Her missing the flight didn't create a better outcome. The conditions simply weren't right for that particular path, and other conditions led her elsewhere. This is what the Buddha called dependent origination. Everything that exists, everything that happens, arises from causes and conditions coming together. Nothing stands alone. Nothing happens in isolation. Everything is connected to everything else in an endless web of causation. When you understand this deeply, something remarkable happens to your suffering. You stop taking things personally, not because you become cold or detached, but because you see clearly what's happening isn't about you being good or bad, worthy or unworthy. It's about conditions. Think about a seed for a moment. You plant it in soil, and then you wait. Days pass. Nothing visible happens. But underground, invisible to your eye, that seed is responding to conditions. Is the soil warm enough? Is there enough moisture? Are nutrients present? Is oxygen available? The seed doesn't sprout because you want it to. It doesn't sprout because you deserve it. It sprouts when, and only when, all the necessary conditions come together. You could stand over that seed every single day, demanding it grow. You could cry about how long it's taking. You could compare it to your neighbor's garden where everything seems to bloom faster. None of that changes anything. The seed responds only to conditions, not to your urgency or your worthiness. This isn't cold comfort. This is liberation. Because when you understand that things arise from conditions, you stop asking the wrong questions. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? You start asking, what conditions are present right now? And more importantly, what conditions can I influence? The Buddha said something that often gets translated as, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Let's sit with that for a moment. Pain, the first arrow, comes with being alive. Bodies get sick, plans fall through, people leave, jobs end, dreams sometimes don't materialize the way we hoped. This is the nature of being human in a world where everything is constantly changing, constantly subject to conditions beyond our control. But suffering, the second arrow, that's different. Suffering is what we add to pain through our resistance, our stories, our refusal to accept what is. You lose your job. That's the first arrow. And yes, it hurts. You need income. You had plans. You feel shocked and disoriented. All of that is the natural pain of change. But then you start shooting the second arrow. I'm a failure. I'll never find another job. Everyone will judge me. My life is ruined. I should have seen this coming. I should have worked harder. Notice the difference. The first arrow is clean pain, direct, immediate, related to actual circumstances. The second arrow is the suffering we create by fighting with reality, by telling ourselves stories about what it means, by catastrophizing about the future or regretting the past. Most of us spend very little time with the first arrow and enormous amounts of time with the second. Here's what this looks like in real time. You're waiting for someone to text you back. Maybe it's someone you just started dating. Maybe it's a friend you're worried about. Maybe it's a potential employer. Hours pass. No response. The first arrow might be a moment of disappointment or concern. Clean, simple, passing. But then the second arrow, they're ignoring me. They don't care. I said something wrong. They've lost interest. I'm always too much or not enough. Nobody ever follows through with me. See how the suffering multiplies? You've gone from a simple moment of waiting to a full narrative about your worthlessness, all while the actual situation might be that their phone died, they got busy, they're dealing with their own challenges. The conditions for them responding haven't aligned yet. That's all. Not because you're unworthy, not because something is wrong with you, just conditions. This understanding doesn't make you passive. It makes you powerful. Because when you stop wasting energy shooting yourself with second arrows, you have that energy available for what actually matters, responding skillfully to the conditions that are present. Let me share another story. There was a farmer in ancient times. This is a classic teaching tale, who had one horse. One day, the horse ran away. The neighbors came and said, "Such bad luck." The farmer replied, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned. bringing 3 wild horses with it. The neighbors exclaimed, "Such good luck!" The farmer said, "Maybe." The following day, the farmer's son tried to ride one of the wild horses and broke his leg. "Such bad luck," cried the neighbors. "Maybe," said the farmer. The day after, military officials came to draft young men into the army, but they passed over the farmer's son because of his broken leg. "Such good luck," the neighbors celebrated. "Maybe," said the farmer. This story isn't about being detached or not caring. It's about understanding that we rarely see all the conditions, all the consequences, all the connections. What looks like disaster might be leading somewhere we can't yet perceive. What looks like great fortune might bring unexpected challenges. We simply don't know. The farmer's wisdom was in not shooting the second arrow. He didn't add stories about good or bad, deserving or unfair. He met each moment as it came, responded to the conditions present, and stayed open to what would arise next. This doesn't mean you don't feel. The farmer certainly had feelings about his horse, his son, the circumstances. But he didn't create additional suffering by insisting reality should be different than it was. Now, you might be thinking, but aren't there genuinely bad things that happen? Things we should fight against? Absolutely. And here's the crucial distinction. Accepting what is doesn't mean accepting what should be. If you're in a harmful situation, acceptance means seeing it clearly, without the fog of denial or the distortion of the second arrow. That clear seeing actually empowers you to respond effectively. When you're not caught up in "why me?" and "this shouldn't be happening," you can ask the useful questions. What are my options right now? And what skillful action can I take? The teaching of the 2 arrows isn't about becoming passive or resigned. It's about becoming clear. Think about learning to swim. When you first enter deep water, there's often panic. You fight against the water, thrashing, creating turbulence, exhausting yourself. That's the second arrow, the resistance to being in water. But when you learn to swim, you work with the water. You stop fighting. You understand how water behaves, how your body can move through it, how to use its properties rather than battle against them. The water hasn't changed. Your relationship to it has. Reality is like that water. You can fight it, exhaust yourself, create turbulence, or you can learn to work with what is. This is where the teaching of dependent origination becomes deeply practical. When you understand that everything arises from causes and conditions, you stop personalizing circumstances. The traffic jam that made you late, it arose from causes, weather, number of cars, road construction, 1,000 factors that have nothing to do with you being good or bad. The job rejection, It arose from conditions. Maybe someone internal was being promoted. Maybe budget got cut. Maybe they wanted different experience. Maybe the hiring manager had unconscious biases. Maybe timing was off. Conditions upon conditions, none of which are about your fundamental worth as a human being. The relationship that ended. It arose from conditions, different life paths, incompatible communication styles, unmet needs, timing, readiness, past wounds, affecting present capacity. Two people whose conditions didn't align for a shared path forward. This understanding is incredibly freeing. You're not at the center of a cosmic judgment system where good people get good things and bad people suffer. You're part of an incomprehensibly complex web of causes and conditions, and sometimes the conditions align for what you want, and sometimes they don't. Your work isn't to control all the conditions. That's impossible. Your work is to influence what you can, accept what you can't, and stop shooting yourself with second arrows in the meantime. There's a meditation practice in Buddhism where you simply note pain versus suffering. When something hurts, you notice it. This is the first arrow. When your mind starts creating stories about it, you notice that too. This is the second arrow. The practice isn't to stop the second arrow from arising. That would be another form of fighting reality. The practice is simply to see it clearly. And in that seeing, in that recognition, something loosens. The second arrow loses some of its power. You start to notice how much of your suffering is optional, how much energy you've been spending arguing with reality, how exhausting it's been to insist that things should be other than they are. And gradually, so gradually you might not notice at first, you begin to put down the second arrow. Not through force or discipline, but through understanding. Through seeing clearly that shooting yourself doesn't change what happened. It only adds more pain to pain. This is the beginning of what the Buddha called the end of suffering. Not the end of difficulty, not the end of challenges or pain. Those continue as long as we're alive. But the end of the extra suffering we pile on top. The end of the war with reality. The end of taking everything personally. When Sarah finally understood this, that missing her flight wasn't punishment, wasn't about her worth, was simply conditions, not aligning, she could let it go. And in that letting go, she had energy to notice the conditions that were present, the opportunities that were actually available, the path that was opening while she'd been mourning the one that closed. The seed metaphor is worth returning to. When conditions aren't right, the seed waits. It doesn't torture itself. It doesn't wonder what's wrong with it. It simply remains in potential, responding to the conditions as they shift, ready to grow when the moment is right. You're like that seed. Some things in your life haven't manifested yet, not because you're inadequate, but because conditions aren't fully ripe. And your job isn't to force ripeness or to suffer while waiting. Your job is to tend to what you can, to water your soil, to ensure you're getting light, to remove rocks where possible, while understanding that the timing of blooming isn't personal. This is what it means to trust in causes and conditions rather than fighting against time. You do your part. You plant seeds. You cultivate skills. You show up. You try. And then you allow reality to unfold according to the infinite conditions at play, most of which you'll never see or understand. There's profound peace available in this understanding. Not the peace of getting everything you want when you want it. That's not possible in a world of causes and conditions. But the peace of no longer fighting with what is, of no longer shooting yourself with second arrows, of no longer believing that your suffering serves any purpose except to create more suffering. The Buddha taught this 2,500 years ago, and it's just as true today. Pain happens. That's the first arrow, and it's part of being alive. But suffering, the second arrow, that's optional. That's something we do to ourselves through resistance, through fighting reality, through insisting things should be different than they are. You can put that arrow down any time. You can stop fighting and start accepting. Not accepting that things can't change, but accepting what is true right now, in this moment, so you can respond clearly rather than react from resistance. The first step is simply noticing. When something hurts, can you distinguish the actual pain from the story you're telling about it? Can you feel where the first arrow struck? And can you see where you picked up the second one? That noticing, that clear seeing, that's the beginning of freedom. Because when you understand that suffering is optional, when you see how you create it through resistance, when you recognize that everything arises from causes and conditions that are mostly beyond your control, you stop taking life so personally. And in that not taking personally, there's space. Space to breathe. Space to respond skillfully. Space to be present with what is, rather than tortured by what isn't. This is what the Buddha offered, not a way to avoid pain, but a way to stop creating unnecessary suffering on top of it. Not a promise that life will be easy, but a path to meet difficulty without multiplying it through resistance. The teaching is simple, but living it takes practice. Every single day, you'll have opportunities to notice the two arrows. Every day, you'll have chances to put down the second one. Some days you'll remember, some days you won't. That's okay too. That's also just conditions. The path isn't about perfection. It's about understanding. And understanding grows gradually, through repeated recognition, through seeing again and again how you suffer and how you could suffer less. So the invitation is this: notice the arrows. Feel the difference between pain and suffering, between what happens and what you add to what happens. And gently, without judgment, begin to put down the second arrow. Not because you're strong enough to avoid pain, but because you're wise enough to stop inflicting it on yourself. Let's continue. There's something most of us believe that creates more suffering than almost anything else. We believe we can control things. We believe that if we just plan carefully enough, work hard enough, anticipate every possibility, we can make life go the way we want it to. And when it doesn't, when things slip through our carefully constructed plans, we tighten our grip even more. The Buddha taught about this 2,500 years ago. He called it upadana, clinging, and he identified it as one of the root causes of human suffering. But here's what makes this teaching so profound. The Buddha wasn't just talking about clinging to things like money or relationships. He was pointing to something deeper, our clinging to the illusion that there's a permanent, separate self that can control reality. Let's start with what control actually costs us. In Buddhist teaching, there are three primary forms of clinging that trap us. The first is clinging to sense pleasures. We grasp at experiences that feel good and push away ones that don't. The second is clinging to views and opinions. We hold tightly to our beliefs about how things are or should be. The third is clinging to rituals and practices. We believe that if we just perform the right actions in the right way, we can control outcomes. Notice something about all three. They're all attempts to create permanence in an impermanent world, to establish control in a reality that's constantly flowing and changing. Here's a story that illustrates this perfectly. It's an old teaching tale about how hunters in certain parts of Asia would catch monkeys. They'd take a coconut, drill a hole in it just big enough for a monkey's hand to fit through, and put rice inside. Then, they'd secure the coconut to a tree. A monkey would come along, smell the rice, reach its hand into the coconut and grab a fistful. But here's the thing, with its fist clenched around the rice, the monkey's hand was too big to pull back through the hole. The monkey was trapped, but not really. At any moment, it could have let go of the rice and pulled its hand free. The trap wasn't the coconut. The trap was the monkey's own clinging. We do this all day long. We reach into situations and grab hold, and then we can't understand why we feel trapped. We're holding so tightly to how things should be, to what we think we need, to our plans and expectations, and that very holding is what imprisons us. A woman once told me she spent 5 years trying to save a relationship that had been over for 4. Every conversation became about fixing, controlling, managing. She read books, tried new approaches, adjusted her behavior, demanded he adjust his. She was exhausted, miserable, but she couldn't let go. If I just find the right way to communicate, she kept thinking. If I just give him what he needs, if I just become what he wants, I can make this work. She was the monkey with her fist around the rice, and the relationship was the coconut she couldn't pull free from. not because she was actually trapped, but because she wouldn't release her grip on how things should be. When she finally let go, when she finally accepted that some things can't be controlled, no matter how hard we try, she described it as simultaneously devastating and liberating. The devastation passed. The liberation remained. This is what the Buddha was pointing to with the teaching of anatta, non-self. It's one of the most misunderstood teachings in Buddhism. So, let's be clear about what it actually means. Anatta doesn't mean you don't exist. It means the self you think you are, solid, permanent, separate, in control, that self is an illusion. What you actually are is a constantly changing process, a flow of experiences and conditions arising and passing away moment by moment. You're not a noun, you're a verb. Think about a river for a moment. When you look at a river, you see something that appears stable, something you can point to and say, that's the Mississippi, or that's the Ganges. But is it really the same river from one moment to the next? The water that was there a second ago has already flowed downstream. New water has taken its place. The riverbed itself shifts over time. Rocks move, sediment settles, banks erode. What you call the river is actually a continuous process of flowing, not a fixed thing. There's a famous quote often attributed to the Buddha, though it actually comes from the Greek philosopher Heraclitus. You cannot step into the same river twice. Why? Because by the time you step in again, it's different water, a different moment, and you're different too. This is exactly what the Buddha meant by anicca impermanence. Everything is process, not entity. Everything is constantly flowing, changing, arising, and passing away. And here's where we create so much suffering. We try to freeze the river. We meet someone and fall in love, and we want that feeling to stay exactly as it is forever. We have a perfect day, and we want to capture it, hold it, repeat it. We find success, and we panic at the thought of it changing. We experience health, youth, security, and we cling desperately to these states, as if we could stop time. But the river keeps flowing, and our attempts to freeze it, to control it, to make it stay as we want it, this is what creates suffering. I know someone who kept every piece of clothing his children wore as babies, every toy, every book, every drawing. His garage was filled with boxes he never opened, items he couldn't use, memories preserved in plastic bins. He was trying to hold on to a version of his children that no longer existed, a time that had already flowed past. His kids are teenagers now. He's so busy clinging to who they were that he keeps missing who they are. This is what control costs us. It costs us the present moment. It costs us our energy, our peace, our ability to respond to what's actually happening right now. It costs us authentic connection because we're relating to our idea of how things should be, rather than how they actually are. And here's the deepest cost. Clinging to control reinforces the illusion of a separate, permanent self that needs to be protected and defended. When you believe you're a fixed entity that exists independently, separate from everything else, then you need to control your environment to ensure your safety and satisfaction. You need things to go your way because you believe there's a you whose interests must be served. But when you begin to see through this illusion, when you start to recognize yourself as part of the flowing river rather than something standing apart from it, the desperate need for control begins to ease. Let's be clear about what letting go actually means in Buddhist practice, because this is where many people get confused. Letting go is not surrender to a higher power. It's not giving up your agency or your ability to make choices. It's not passive resignation to whatever happens. Letting go is releasing your clinging to outcomes. It's the difference between doing your best and demanding a specific result. It's the difference between having preferences and having rigid requirements for reality. You can still plan, still work toward goals, still have hopes and dreams, but you hold them lightly, understanding that you're not in complete control of how things unfold. You influence conditions, but you don't control all conditions. There's a famous Zen parable that illustrates this perfectly. A farmer had one horse, which was his family's most valuable possession. One day, the horse ran away. The neighbors came to express sympathy. "Such terrible luck," they said. The farmer simply replied, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned, bringing with it 3 wild horses. The neighbors rushed over to congratulate him. "Such wonderful luck," they exclaimed. The farmer said, "Maybe." The following day, the farmer's son tried to ride one of the wild horses and was thrown off, breaking his leg. The neighbors gathered again. "Such bad luck," they lamented. "Maybe," said the farmer. The day after that, military officials came through the village, conscripting all able-bodied young men for war. They passed over the farmer's son because of his broken leg. "Such amazing luck," the neighbors celebrated. "Maybe," said the farmer. This story isn't teaching detachment in the sense of not caring. The farmer certainly cared about his horse, his son, his family's well-being. But he understood something crucial. He couldn't see all the conditions, all the consequences, all the ways things would unfold. What looked like disaster might lead somewhere beneficial. What looked like fortune might bring unexpected challenges. He couldn't control the flow of events, and he knew it. So instead of clinging to outcomes, instead of constantly grasping at good and pushing away bad, he stayed present with what was actually happening and responded to each situation as it arose. This is what it means to let go in Buddhist practice. Not to stop caring, not to stop acting, but to stop clinging to how things must be. The practice itself is simple to describe, though not always easy to do. It starts with noticing where you're clinging right now. Take a moment, really, right now, and just scan your inner experience. Where are you holding tightly? What are you trying to control? Maybe it's a conversation you keep replaying, wishing you'd said something different. That's clinging to the past, trying to control what's already happened. Maybe it's worry about tomorrow, next week, next year, rehearsing scenarios, planning conversations, trying to anticipate and manage every possibility. That's clinging to the future, trying to control what hasn't happened yet. Maybe it's a relationship where you keep thinking, if they would just, or why can't they? That's clinging to who you think they should be, rather than accepting who they are. Maybe it's your own emotions, trying to force yourself to feel differently, berating yourself for anxiety or sadness or anger, as if you could control your inner weather through willpower alone. The practice is simply to notice the clinging without judgment. Not to shame yourself for it, not to try to force yourself to let go. That would just be more clinging, more control. Just notice it, feel it, recognize it for what it is. Oh, I'm trying to control this. I'm clinging to this outcome. I'm grasping at this idea of how things should be. In that simple recognition, something begins to shift. The grip loosens slightly, not because you forced it to, but because you saw it clearly. Let me tell you about Marcus. He was a manager at a tech company, and his team wasn't performing the way he wanted. He held more meetings, created more systems, sent more emails, outlining exactly how things should be done. The more he tightened control, the worse things got. People became afraid to make decisions without checking with him first. Innovation died. The team's energy flatlined. He came to a meditation class completely burned out, desperate for something to change. When he heard the teaching about clinging and control, something cracked open. "I've been the monkey," he said. "My fist is so tight around how I think things should be that I can't even see what's actually happening." He started practicing letting go, not by abandoning his responsibilities, but by loosening his grip on outcomes. He still provided guidance and support, but he stopped trying to control every detail. He started trusting his team to find their own solutions. He began responding to what was actually happening, rather than comparing it constantly to his ideal. The team transformed within months, not because he got better at controlling them, but because he stopped trying to. This is the paradox of letting go. When you release the illusion of control, you often become more effective, not less. Why? Because you're working with reality as it is, rather than fighting against it. Because your energy isn't being drained by constant resistance. Because you're able to see clearly and respond flexibly, rather than forcing predetermined solutions. Think again about the river. If you're trying to dam it up, stop it, control its flow, you're in constant battle with immense force. But if you understand the river's nature, if you work with its flow rather than against it, you can navigate it skillfully. A kayaker doesn't control the river. They understand it, read it, respond to it. They know when to paddle hard and when to let the current carry them. They know how to use the river's own energy rather than fighting against it. This is the wisdom of letting go, not weakness, but skillfulness. Not giving up, but waking up to how things actually work. The Buddha taught that our belief in a permanent, controllable self is the root of this clinging. We think there's a me that exists independently, that needs to be protected and satisfied, that can and should control its environment. But look closely at your own experience. Where is this fixed self? Your body is constantly changing, cells dying and regenerating, sensations arising and passing. Your thoughts are constantly changing. One moment you're thinking about work, the next about dinner, the next about a memory from childhood. Your emotions are constantly changing. Peaceful 1 hour, irritated the next, content the next. What we call self is actually a flowing process, not a fixed entity. You are more like the river than the rock, and trying to create a permanent, controllable self in the midst of constant flow, that's exhausting. When you really see this, when you experience directly that there's no separate, permanent self that needs to control everything, the desperate quality of clinging begins to ease. You're not giving up your identity or your ability to function in the world. You're seeing through an illusion that was causing suffering. Here's a practical way to work with this. The next time you notice yourself trying to control something, pause and ask, what am I really afraid will happen if I let go? Often, underneath the need for control is fear. Fear that you won't be okay, that you'll be hurt, that something essential will be lost. And underneath that fear is the belief in a vulnerable, separate self that needs protecting. But when you look directly at that fear, when you turn toward it, rather than trying to control it away, you might discover something surprising. You're more resilient than you thought. You've survived every moment of your life so far, including many you couldn't control. You have the capacity to meet what comes. This doesn't mean nothing bad will ever happen. It means you don't need to exhaust yourself trying to prevent every possibility of difficulty. It means you can trust in your own ability to respond, to adapt, to continue flowing like the river, rather than trying to freeze into permanent safety. The teaching of letting go isn't about becoming passive or not caring about anything. It's about distinguishing between what you can actually influence and what you can't, and then releasing your grip on the latter. You can influence your own actions, your own responses, your own practice. You can create conditions that make certain outcomes more likely. But you can't control other people, circumstances, the flow of life itself. And the energy you waste trying to control what you can't, that energy could be used for what you actually can do, showing up fully present, responding with wisdom and compassion, cultivating peace in your own mind. There's a meditation practice where you simply notice the breath without trying to control it. You're not making it deeper or slower or different in any way. You're just observing it as it naturally is. At first, this is surprisingly difficult. You'll catch yourself trying to breathe in a certain way, trying to make it better, trying to control even this simple, automatic process. But gradually, you learn to just let the breath be what it is. And in that practice of not controlling the breath, you're learning something deeper, how to not control life, how to let things be as they are, while still remaining present and engaged. This is the freedom the Buddha pointed to. Not the freedom to control everything, which is impossible and exhausting, but the freedom that comes from releasing the illusion that you need to control everything. The monkey can free its hand from the coconut any time it wants. It just has to let go of the rice. You can free yourself from so much suffering anytime you want. You just have to let go of the belief that you can and must control how life unfolds. This doesn't happen all at once. You'll grab hold again, many times. You'll find yourself trying to control, trying to force, trying to make things be different than they are. That's okay. That's part of the process too. The practice is simply to notice when it happens, to recognize the clinging without judgment, and to gently release when you're ready. And then to notice again and release again, over and over for the rest of your life. This is not defeat. This is wisdom. This is learning to swim with the current, rather than exhausting yourself swimming against it. The river is going to flow whether you try to control it or not. Your life is going to unfold through causes and conditions that are mostly beyond your influence. The question is, will you exhaust yourself trying to freeze what cannot be frozen, or will you learn to flow? The Buddha's answer is clear: let go. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to recognize what you never had control over in the first place. And in that letting go, you might discover something unexpected, that you were never actually separate from the river at all. You are the river. You are the flow. You are the continuous process of arising and passing, of changing and becoming. There's nothing to control because there's no separate controller. There's only this moment, this breath, this experience arising from infinite conditions and flowing into the next moment. That's not loss. That's liberation. Take a breath right now. Notice where you're holding tight. And see if you can soften that grip just a little, just for this moment. That's the practice. That's enough. There's a story about bamboo that gets told often, but usually with the wrong lesson. People say it's about faith, about trusting the universe, about waiting for your miracle. But that's not what the bamboo teaches at all. Here's what actually happens. When you plant Chinese bamboo, you water it, tend the soil, ensure it gets sunlight. And for 4 years, sometimes 5, you see almost nothing above ground. Just a tiny shoot, barely visible, seemingly not growing at all. Then, in the 5th year, that bamboo can grow 90 feet in 6 weeks. The miracle interpretation says, "See, the universe was working in secret. Your breakthrough is coming. Just wait." But that's not what's happening. What's actually happening is this. For those 4 years, the bamboo is growing an extensive root system underground. It's spreading roots in every direction, deep and wide, creating the foundation that will support that dramatic vertical growth. The growth isn't magic. It's preparation. It's the accumulation of causes and conditions. And here's what matters most. The farmer doesn't just wait. Every single day of those 4 years, the farmer waters, tends, maintains. Active patience. Continuous cultivation. The farmer can't force the bamboo to grow faster, but the farmer also can't just plant it and walk away, trusting the universe to handle everything. The farmer participates in creating the conditions for growth, while accepting the natural timeline of that growth. This is what the Buddha taught about patience, and it's completely different from passive waiting. In Pali, the language of early Buddhist texts, the word for patience is khanti. It's listed as one of the 10 paramis, the 10 perfections that lead to awakening. But khanti doesn't mean sitting around hoping things will get better. It means cultivating unshakable inner stability while actively engaging with what's in front of you. These 10 perfections aren't abstract ideals. They're practical qualities you develop through continuous practice. Generosity, ethical conduct, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, determination, loving kindness, and equanimity. Each one builds on the others, and patience sits right in the middle, supporting everything else. Without patience, you can't sustain practice. Without patience, the first difficulty makes you quit. Without patience, you demand immediate results and abandon the path when they don't come. But with patience, real patience, active patience, you can maintain practice through anything. The Buddha himself is the perfect example of this. After years of seeking, After trying every practice available in his time, he sat down under the Bodhi tree and made a vow he would not rise until he understood the nature of suffering and its end. He didn't sit there waiting for enlightenment to be delivered to him. He wasn't passive. He was practicing with full intensity, observing his mind with unwavering attention, investigating the nature of reality, working with the conditions he could influence, while accepting the ones he couldn't. He sat for 49 days. And according to the stories, during that time, he faced everything that would test his patience: doubt, fear, desire, all the ways the mind tries to pull us away from sustained practice. His patience wasn't about waiting for something external to happen. It was about maintaining his practice, regardless of how long it took, regardless of results, regardless of whether awakening came in an hour or a lifetime. That's khanti. That's real patience. And then, when all the conditions aligned, his effort, his concentration, his wisdom, his readiness, understanding arose. Not because he waited, but because he cultivated. This distinction is crucial. Waiting is passive, and it breeds helplessness. Cultivation is active, and it builds capacity. When you're waiting, you're at the mercy of external circumstances. When will they call? When will it happen? When will things change? You're suspended in time, powerless, watching the clock, refreshing your email, checking your phone, living in a constant state of anticipation that drains your energy and steals your presence. But when you're cultivating, you're engaged with what you can do right now. You're planting seeds, watering roots, creating conditions. You're building the foundation for what you want to grow, while understanding that the timeline of that growth isn't entirely up to you. Let me tell you about Maria. She was a writer who desperately wanted to publish a novel. She'd written 3 complete manuscripts over the years, sent out hundreds of queries to agents, collected rejection after rejection. For a while, she fell into passive waiting. After sending queries, she'd sit by her email, refreshing constantly, her stomach in knots, unable to work on anything new because she was so consumed by waiting for responses. Weeks would pass in this anxious suspension. Then she encountered the Buddhist teaching on right effort, samavayama. Right effort is about applying energy in ways that actually support growth and awakening. It's divided into 4 parts: preventing unwholesome states from arising, abandoning unwholesome states that have arisen, cultivating wholesome states that haven't yet arisen, and maintaining wholesome states that are present. Maria realized her anxious waiting was an unwholesome state. It wasn't helping her, wasn't moving her forward, was actually preventing her from doing what she could do. So she shifted her practice. She still sent queries, but then she immediately returned to cultivation, writing the next thing, studying craft, reading widely, joining a writing group, practicing daily. She was creating conditions for her growth as a writer, regardless of whether publication came today or in 10 years. This is active patience. She couldn't control whether agents would respond or publishers would accept her work. Those conditions included factors beyond her influence. But she could control her own practice, her own development, her own relationship to the process. 3 years later, her 4th novel found a home with a publisher. But here's what mattered more. She'd written 2 more novels in that time, grown tremendously as a writer, and found genuine peace in the practice itself, rather than torturing herself with waiting. The publication was wonderful when it came, but it wasn't what saved her. What saved her was learning to cultivate instead of wait. This is what the Buddha taught about samavayama. Right effort isn't about forcing or controlling outcomes. It's about wisely directing your energy toward what you can actually influence, then maintaining that effort with patience and equanimity, regardless of results. Equanimity, upekkha in Pali, is the other essential quality here. It's often misunderstood as not caring, but that's completely wrong. Equanimity is caring deeply while not being thrown around by outcomes. It's staying steady in the midst of change, maintaining your practice, whether things go well or poorly. Think of a tree in a storm. The branches bend, the leaves shake, but the trunk remains rooted. That's equanimity, flexible enough to move with conditions, but stable at the core. A farmer plants seeds in spring. Some years bring good rain, strong sun, excellent harvest. Other years bring drought or flood or pests. The farmer doesn't control the weather, doesn't control all the conditions that determine harvest. But does the farmer stop planting because outcomes aren't guaranteed? No. The farmer plants every season, tends the crops with care, and accepts what the combination of effort and conditions produces. This is patient cultivation, without attachment to specific timelines or guaranteed results. This is what Buddhist practice actually looks like. Now let's get practical about what this means for your life right now. Whatever you're waiting for, the relationship, the job, the healing, the change, the clarity, ask yourself this: what can I cultivate while conditions ripen? If you're waiting for a relationship, what can you cultivate now? Perhaps learning to be comfortable in your own company, developing interests that genuinely engage you, becoming someone you'd want to spend time with, healing old patterns that might interfere with connection. If you're waiting for a job, what can you cultivate? New skills, expanded network, deeper understanding of what you actually want to do, resilience in the face of rejection, clarity about your values. If you're waiting for healing, what can you cultivate? The practices that support wellness, patience with the body's timeline, acceptance of what is, while working toward what could be, understanding of what's within your influence. This shift from waiting to cultivating changes everything. Suddenly you're not powerless. You're not at the mercy of external timing. You have a practice, something meaningful to do with your energy and attention. And here's what's profound. Often, by the time the thing you were waiting for arrives, you've grown so much through cultivation that either you're truly ready for it or you've discovered you don't need it in the way you thought you did. There's a man named James who spent years waiting to start his life after he lost significant weight. He'd tell himself, "When I lose 50 pounds, then I'll date. Then I'll apply for better jobs. Then I'll be happy." His life was on hold, suspended in passive waiting. Then a friend introduced him to meditation and Buddhist teachings. He started practicing not just sitting meditation, but the cultivation of qualities he wanted to embody: kindness, confidence, engagement with life. He started doing things he'd postponed, taking a class that interested him, volunteering, actually showing up for his own life. Something shifted. He did eventually lose weight, but it happened naturally, as a side effect of being actively engaged rather than passively waiting. More importantly, by the time he reached his goal weight, he'd already been living fully for 2 years. The weight wasn't the magic threshold he'd imagined. The cultivation was. The Buddha taught that patience isn't about suspending your life until conditions are perfect. It's about engaging fully with the conditions that are present now while maintaining steady effort toward what you're cultivating. This requires 2 things that seem contradictory, but are actually complementary: sustained effort and non-attachment to timeline. Sustained effort means you keep showing up, keep practicing, keep planting and watering, even when you can't see growth happening. Like the farmer with the bamboo, every day, for years, even when nothing seems to be changing. Non-attachment to timeline means you do this without constantly asking, when? Without measuring yourself against others' timelines, without deciding that if it doesn't happen by a certain date, it means something is wrong with you. These 2 together create genuine patience, active, engaged, yet peaceful. I know someone who practiced meditation for 7 years before experiencing what teachers call a breakthrough, a shift in understanding that changed how she related to everything. 7 years of daily practice, with no dramatic experiences, no special insights, just showing up to sit with her breath day after day. People asked her, "Didn't you get frustrated? Didn't you want to quit?" She said, "I stopped waiting for something to happen and started appreciating the practice itself." Each day of practice was its own value, regardless of where it led. That's patient cultivation. That's Kanti. And when that breakthrough finally came, she said it didn't feel like something that arrived from outside. It felt like something that had been slowly developing all along, like roots spreading underground, until suddenly conditions were right for it to become visible. This is how causes and conditions work with patience. You don't control the timeline, but you're not passive in the process. You're actively participating in creating the conditions that make growth possible, while accepting that the ripening of those conditions follows its own natural timing. Here's a practice you can start right now. Take something you've been waiting for. Really, think of something specific. Now ask yourself 3 questions. First, what aspects of this are within my influence? Not control, but influence. What can I actually do? Second, what qualities would serve me in this situation? Patience, certainly, but what else? Courage, clarity, resilience, openness. Name them specifically. Third, how can I cultivate those qualities starting today? Not tomorrow when conditions are better, not after something changes, today, with what's available right now. Then do that. Cultivate those qualities through practice. This is active patience. Maybe you're waiting for clarity about a major life decision. You can't force clarity to arrive, but you can cultivate the conditions that support it. Quiet reflection time, journaling, conversations with wise friends, sitting meditation that settles the mind's agitation. Maybe you're waiting for a difficult situation to resolve. You can't control all the factors, but you can cultivate the inner stability that helps you remain balanced regardless of how long it takes. Maybe you're waiting to feel ready for something you want to do. You can't force readiness, but you can cultivate the skills and confidence that contribute to it. This is the teaching. Patience is not passive, it's preparatory. You're not suspended in time waiting for something external to rescue you. You're actively engaged in creating the conditions for what you want to grow, while understanding that growth follows its own timeline. The Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree with this understanding. He wasn't waiting for enlightenment to happen to him. He was practicing with full commitment until the conditions for awakening ripened. Some nights, probably, he wondered if he was wasting his time. Some mornings, likely, he felt no closer than when he started. But he kept practicing. And when understanding arose, it arose not because time passed, but because continuous practice created the conditions for understanding to arise. Your life works the same way. Time passing doesn't create change. Causes and conditions create change. And while you can't control all conditions, you can influence many of them through sustained, patient cultivation. The bamboo farmer waters the invisible roots for years. Your practice might feel invisible too. You're working on yourself, developing qualities, creating conditions, and nothing dramatic seems to be happening. That's okay. That's normal. That's how cultivation works. Underground, unseen, roots are spreading. Inner capacity is developing. conditions are slowly aligning. And one day, perhaps when you least expect it, growth becomes visible, not because you waited, but because you cultivated. Think about learning any skill, playing an instrument, speaking a language, building strength. The first weeks, sometimes months, feel like nothing is happening. You practice scales that sound clumsy, conjugate verbs you immediately forget, lift weights that barely budge. Progress is invisible. But if you keep practicing, if you maintain effort without demanding immediate results, something remarkable happens. One day you sit down at the piano and your fingers know where to go. One day you realize you understood an entire conversation in another language. One day you notice the weights that once seemed impossible are now your warm-up. That's not magic. That's accumulated practice, creating conditions for capacity to emerge. That's roots spreading underground until they can support visible growth. This is patience as path, not passive waiting. This is right effort combined with equanimity. This is how you engage fully with life, while accepting that you're not in complete control of timelines. So, if you find yourself waiting today, ask, what am I cultivating? If the answer is only anxiety and impatience, shift your energy. Find something you can practice, some quality you can develop, some condition you can influence. Water your roots, even when nothing is visible above ground. Trust not in the universe or fate, but in the natural way that causes and conditions work, slowly, invisibly, but surely. Your patience is not passive endurance of time passing. It's active engagement with the present moment, cultivating what you can, accepting what you can't, maintaining your practice, regardless of results. That's the path. That's Kanti. That's how growth actually happens. Keep watering your bamboo. A book falls off your shelf. You pick it up, and it opens to a page with exactly the message you needed to hear that day. Your phone rings just as you were thinking about someone. You miss a train, then meet someone in the station who changes your life. Most people call these moments synchronicity, divine timing, the universe sending signs. They build entire spiritual philosophies around the idea that reality is trying to communicate with them, guide them, show them the way. But the Buddha taught something different, something far more profound than a cosmic messaging system. He taught that everything is connected, not through divine intention, but through an inconceivably complex web of causes and conditions. Every single thing that exists, every event that occurs, arises from countless causes that themselves arose from countless causes, stretching back infinitely. This is called dependent origination, pratitya samutpada in Sanskrit. It's the central insight of Buddhism, the key that unlocks everything else. The Buddha said it simply, when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. Nothing stands alone. Nothing is independent. Everything arises in dependence on conditions. And when those conditions change, everything changes with them. Let's go back to that book falling off the shelf. The New Age interpretation says the universe knocked it down to give you a message. But look at what actually happened through the lens of dependent origination. The book fell because of causes. Maybe a vibration from traffic outside. Maybe the way you stacked books created instability. Maybe humidity changed the wood of the shelf. Maybe you bumped the shelf earlier without noticing. Each of those causes had its own causes stretching back infinitely. It opened to that particular page because of how it landed, which depended on its weight distribution, the angle it fell, the surface it hit. You noticed the message on that page because your mind was already preoccupied with that particular concern, so those words stood out against background noise. Your attention selected what seemed meaningful from everything available, the way it always does. That's not a cosmic sign. That's how consciousness works. You notice what matters to you. This explanation doesn't make the moment less meaningful. It makes it more wondrous. Because what you're seeing is the staggering interconnection of all things, not through divine planning, but through the natural unfolding of cause and effect in an infinitely complex system where everything touches everything else. There's a teaching metaphor in Buddhism called Indra's net. Imagine a vast net stretching infinitely in all directions. At each intersection where the threads cross, there's a perfectly reflective jewel. Each jewel reflects all the other jewels in the net. And because each jewel reflects all the others, each jewel also reflects the reflections in all the other jewels, which themselves contain reflections of reflections infinitely. This is reality. Not a metaphor for reality. This is how things actually are. Every phenomenon reflects and is reflected by every other phenomenon. Everything interpenetrates everything else through endless chains of causation. You are one jewel in this infinite net. Your existence depends on the existence of everything else. The air you breathe, the food you eat, the ground beneath your feet, the people who raised you, the countless beings and conditions that made your life possible. And your existence affects everything else in turn. Every action you take sends ripples through the net, influencing conditions near and far, in ways you'll never fully see. This is what the Buddha meant by interconnection. Not that a cosmic intelligence is arranging meaningful coincidences for you, but that reality is so deeply interconnected that the boundary between self and other, between your life and the rest of existence, is ultimately artificial. A woman once told me about an experience that convinced her the universe was sending her signs. She was torn between 2 job offers and couldn't decide. She went for a walk, asking for a sign, and saw a bird land on a branch directly in front of her. It looked at her. She swears it looked right at her, then flew toward the left. She took the job on the left side of the page in her notebook, and it turned out wonderfully. Was the universe guiding her? No. But was something real happening? Yes. What was happening was this. She had reached a point where her conscious mind couldn't decide, but her entire being, body, intuition, the accumulation of all her experiences and values, already knew which choice aligned better with her deepest truth. The walk calmed her mind enough for that deeper knowing to surface. The bird was just a bird, doing what birds do, flying in a direction determined by 1,000 factors: wind, food sources, nesting sites. But her attention, now receptive and quiet, seized on the bird's movement and used it as permission to acknowledge what she already knew. The decision didn't come from the bird. It came from her. But she needed something external to trust what was already clear internally. This is what usually happens with signs. We're looking for permission to trust our own knowing, so we project that authority onto external events. But the Buddha taught something more empowering. You can develop the capacity to discern clearly without needing external validation. You can learn to read the conditions within your own experience with such clarity that you know which way to move. This happens through mindfulness, the practice of paying careful, non-judgmental attention to what's actually happening in your experience right now. When you practice mindfulness, you begin to notice patterns. Not cosmic patterns, but the patterns of your own body and mind. You notice that certain situations create tightness in your chest, contraction, a sense of closing down. Other situations create openness, ease, a sense of expansion. These aren't random. They're your organism responding to conditions with extraordinary intelligence. Intelligence that's usually operating below conscious awareness. Your body knows things your thinking mind doesn't know yet. It's processing enormous amounts of information, subtle cues, past experiences, patterns recognized, but not yet articulated. It's responding to the web of causes and conditions with an intelligence that predates language, predates thought. Learning to read this isn't mystical, it's practical. It's noticing the difference between peace and agitation, between genuine rightness and anxious grasping, between clarity and confusion. Here's a practice you can try right now. Think about a decision you're facing, something where you genuinely don't know what to do. Hold both options in awareness, one at a time. First option. Where do you feel it in your body? Does your chest tighten or open? Does your breathing get shallow or deep? Do your shoulders rise or settle? Does your jaw clench or soften? Just notice, without judging, without deciding what any of it means. Second option. Same process. Where do you feel this one? What happens to your breath, your shoulders, your chest? Often there's a clear difference. One creates contraction, the other creates ease. This isn't the universe telling you what to do. This is your own deep intelligence speaking through the body. The practice is learning to listen, learning to trust what you're sensing without needing to project it onto cosmic signs or divine guidance. This is wise discernment, prajna in Sanskrit. It's not about receiving messages from outside. It's about developing such clarity in your own awareness that you can see conditions as they actually are and respond appropriately. Sometimes people say, "But I've made decisions that felt right in my body, and they turned out badly." Yes, that happens. Because you're not reading the future, you're reading present conditions. And conditions change. What felt right based on the information available, based on conditions as they were, might lead somewhere unexpected when conditions shift. That's not a failure of discernment. That's the nature of living in a reality where everything is constantly changing, where causes and conditions are always in flux. The practice isn't about achieving perfect outcomes. It's about making the clearest choice possible with the conditions present, then accepting that you can't control all the conditions that determine what happens next. This brings us back to trust, but a different kind of trust than trusting the universe. The Buddha's famous last words were, "Be a lamp unto yourself." Don't look for authority outside yourself, not in teachers, not in cosmic signs, not in divine guidance. Develop your own light, your own clarity, your own capacity to see truthfully. This doesn't mean ignoring wisdom from others or thinking you know everything. It means that ultimately, you have to verify truth through your own direct experience. You have to develop your own capacity for discernment rather than constantly seeking external validation. Trust in this context means trusting the process of practice itself. Trusting that when you pay attention clearly, when you practice mindfulness, when you develop concentration and wisdom, your capacity to discern grows. It's trust based on evidence, on direct experience of how practice works. You notice that when you meditate regularly, your mind becomes clearer. When you practice mindfulness, you catch destructive patterns earlier. When you cultivate wisdom, better choices emerge naturally. This kind of trust grows from seeing cause and effect directly in your own life. Not from belief in something you can't verify, but from repeated experience of how certain causes lead to certain effects. Let me tell you about David. For years, he made decisions based on what he thought were signs from the universe. A song on the radio, a repeated number, a dream, he'd interpret these as guidance and act accordingly. Sometimes things worked out, sometimes they didn't, but he never knew if he was reading the signs correctly or just seeing what he wanted to see. Then he started meditating. At first, it had nothing to do with decision-making. He just wanted to feel less anxious. But after months of practice, something shifted. He noticed he could tell the difference between fear and intuition, between grasping and genuine interest, between decisions made from clarity and decisions made from confusion. He didn't need external signs anymore because he'd developed internal discernment. Looking back, he could see how the signs he'd relied on were really just his attention, selecting things that confirmed what some part of him already knew. The universe wasn't sending messages. His own mind was trying to get his attention. When you develop this kind of clarity, you can look back at your life and see the web of causes and conditions that brought you here. Not a divine plan, but an intricate unfolding of countless factors, most of which you never consciously chose, but all of which contributed to this present moment. You see how that job you didn't get led you to the one you have now, how that relationship ending created space for growth you desperately needed, how that difficult period built capacities you're using today. But you're not seeing the hand of God or the universe arranging things for your benefit. You're seeing dependent origination, how effects arise from causes in an endlessly complex web where what seems like misfortune in one moment becomes the condition for something valuable in another. This understanding is liberating because it removes the anxiety of trying to read signs correctly. There are no signs to read. There's just the constant flow of causes and conditions arising and passing away. Your work is to cultivate clarity so you can see conditions as they actually are and respond skillfully. To develop concentration so your mind isn't constantly scattered by distraction. To build wisdom so you understand which actions lead to more suffering and which lead to less. This is practical, verifiable, trustworthy, in a way that, depending on cosmic signs, never can be. So when a door closes, you don't need to tell yourself the universe is protecting you from something. You can simply recognize that conditions weren't aligned for that particular path, and that's information to useful, practical information about reality as it is. When a door opens, you don't need to see it as a sign you're on the right track. You can recognize that conditions have come together in a way that makes this possible right now, and you can evaluate clearly whether it aligns with your values and aspirations. The opening and closing of doors isn't about you being good or bad, deserving or undeserving. It's just conditions, shifting, changing, arising, and ceasing according to causes you sometimes influence and often don't. This might sound cold at first, less comforting than believing in a benevolent universe guiding you. But actually, it's far more empowering, because it means you're not waiting for signs to tell you what to do. You're developing your own capacity to see clearly and choose wisely. You're not looking for permission from external events. You're cultivating internal authority based on direct understanding. And when you act from that clarity, you're adding your own thread to Indra's net. Your choices become conditions that affect everything else, rippling out in ways you may never see but that nonetheless matter. You're not receiving messages from reality. You're participating in reality, creating conditions through your actions, while accepting that you're also shaped by conditions beyond your control. This is the ancient teaching of interconnection. Everything touching everything else through infinite chains of causation. No cosmic messenger needed, just the staggering complexity of causes and conditions arising moment by moment by moment. Your attention notices patterns in this complexity. Your body responds with wisdom to what it senses. Your practice of mindfulness reveals more and more subtle connections, more precise understanding of how conditions work. And gradually, you become your own lamp. Not because you know everything, not because you can control outcomes, but because you can see clearly enough to respond appropriately to whatever arises. That's better than signs. That's wisdom. Be your own lamp. Right now, as you read these words, where is your mind? Is it fully here, present with these sentences, or is part of it somewhere else, replaying a conversation from yesterday, planning tomorrow's schedule, worrying about something that might happen next week? Most of us spend very little time in the present moment. We're almost always somewhere else mentally. In the past we can't change, or the future we can't control. But here's what the Buddha taught clearly, repeatedly, at the very heart of his message: there is only now. The past is memory, traces in your mind, stories you tell yourself, interpretations of what happened that shift each time you recall them. The past doesn't exist anywhere except as thought arising in the present moment. The future is imagination, projection, anticipation, planning, worry about what might be. The future doesn't exist anywhere except as thought arising in the present moment. This present moment is the only reality you ever actually experience. Everything else is mental activity happening now, about then. This isn't philosophy or metaphysics. This is direct, verifiable truth. Check your own experience right now. Can you actually touch the past? Can you actually grasp the future? Or is there only this breath, these words, this moment of awareness, reading them? In Zen Buddhism, there's a practice called the tea ceremony, chanoyu. It's not really about tea, though tea is involved. It's about bringing complete attention to each small action, each simple moment, until the ordinary becomes sacred through presence alone. You heat the water, listening to its sound as temperature rises. You measure the tea with full attention. You pour slowly, watching the steam rise, feeling the warmth of the cup in your hands. You lift it to your lips with awareness of each movement. You taste, really taste, the first sip, present with the flavor, the temperature, the sensation. This isn't special tea or a special cup or a special place. What makes it special is attention. What makes it sacred is presence. You can drink tea like this, fully present, or you can drink it while scrolling your phone, thinking about work, planning dinner, barely noticing you're drinking anything at all. Same tea, same cup, completely different experience. One is actually living, the other is existing while mentally elsewhere. The Buddha taught that this presence, awareness, being fully here, is the foundation of everything else. He called it sati, usually translated as mindfulness. It means remembering to be where you are, remembering to return attention to this moment when it wanders into past or future. Without sati, you're living in a dream of memory and projection. With sati, you're awake to the only life that's actually happening, this one, right now. Most people go through entire days barely present. They eat breakfast while planning the morning meeting. They sit in the meeting thinking about the email they need to send. They send the email worried about the conversation they'll have later. They have the conversation already composing their defense for the next difficult interaction. Always somewhere else, never fully here, life passing by unnoticed. And then one day they wake up and years have gone by. They can't remember them clearly because they weren't really present for them. They were thinking about other moments during each moment. And now those moments are gone, and what remains is a vague sense of time lost, life unlived. This is the tragedy the Buddha was pointing to. Not that life is suffering because bad things happen, but that we suffer by not actually being present for the life we have. There's a beautiful teaching in Buddhism about cherry blossoms, sakura. In Japan, people gather each spring to view the cherry trees in bloom, and it's treated as a profound spiritual practice, not just aesthetic enjoyment. Why? Because cherry blossoms last only a few days. They bloom brilliantly, abundantly, and then they fall. The very fact that they're temporary is what makes them precious. This is the teaching of anicca impermanence. The Buddha said, all conditioned things are impermanent. Everything that arises will cease. Everything that comes together will come apart. Nothing lasts. Most of us hear this as bad news. We think it means we can't count on anything, can't trust in stability, are doomed to loss. But that's not what the Buddha meant at all. Impermanence isn't what makes life painful. Impermanence is what makes life possible. If nothing changed, you'd never heal from injury. You'd never recover from heartbreak. You'd never learn anything new or grow in any way. You'd be frozen in whatever state you were in, forever. The very thing we fear, change, is what allows for every good thing we experience. The cherry blossoms aren't precious, despite being temporary. They're precious because they're temporary. If cherry trees bloomed year-round, forever, would anyone gather to appreciate them? Would their beauty move us the same way? It's precisely because we know they'll be gone soon that we show up fully to witness them while they're here. Your life is exactly like this. This conversation you're having, this meal you're eating, this person you're with, this phase you're in, it's all temporary. And that's not a problem to solve. It's what makes this moment matter. When you deeply understand impermanence, you stop postponing presence. You stop saying, "I'll really appreciate this when," or "I'll be happy after." You recognize that this moment is all you have, and it's already disappearing, even as you experience it. That recognition isn't depressing, it's liberating. It wakes you up. A teacher once asked students, if you knew you had only one more day to live, what would you do differently? The responses were revealing. People would tell loved ones they care about them, would stop worrying about small things, would appreciate simple pleasures they usually overlook, would be present instead of distracted. The teacher said, "You do have only one more day. This day, you never have more than one day, today. Everything else is memory or imagination. So why wait for a terminal diagnosis to live like someone who understands impermanence? Why postpone being present until some imagined future when you'll have time? This moment, right now, is your life. Not a piece of it, not preparation for it, not waiting for it to really begin. This is it. This is what being alive means. The Buddha taught very simple, practical ways to come back to this present moment. Not complex techniques or mystical practices, just basic awareness of what's actually happening right now. Start with the breath. The breath is always happening in the present. You can't breathe yesterday's breath or tomorrow's breath. Only this breath, right now. So when your mind is spinning in past or future, when you're caught in worry or regret or planning, you can always return to the breath. Just notice it, the sensation of air moving in, the pause, the sensation of air moving out, the pause. You don't have to change it or control it or make it special. Just notice it as it is. That's it. That's the practice. And it's profound because in that simple returning to breath, you're returning to now, to presence, to the only moment that's real. You can do the same with the 5 senses. Right now, what do you hear? Not what you think about what you're hearing, just the raw sound itself. Birds, traffic, wind, silence, the hum of electronics, someone's voice. Just sound, arising and passing in this moment. What do you see? light and shadow, colors, shapes, movement, or stillness. Just seeing, without the story about what you're seeing. What do you feel? The pressure of your body against the chair or bed or floor, the temperature of air on your skin, the weight of clothes, any tension or ease in your muscles, just sensation, happening now. What do you smell or taste? Even if it's subtle, there's always something, the faint scent of your environment, the taste in your mouth, the air you're breathing, carrying information you usually don't notice. These aren't distractions from more important things. These are your actual life, happening right now. Everything else, all your thoughts about past and future, those are the distraction from the life you're actually living. There's a man named Thomas who told me he spent years waiting to feel ready to really live. He'd think, when I get promoted, then I'll relax and enjoy life. When I meet the right person, then I'll be happy. When I have more money, then I'll do the things I want to do. Always when, never now. Then his father died suddenly, without warning. His father had also been waiting for retirement to travel, waiting until the house was paid off to enjoy himself, waiting for someday to really live. Someday never came. Thomas said the death shattered his illusion that he had unlimited time. He realized he'd been living like he had a dress rehearsal, like this wasn't the real thing yet. But there is no rehearsal. This is it, the only life you get, and it's happening right now, and every moment you spend mentally elsewhere is a moment lost forever. He started practicing presence. Not perfectly, not constantly, but regularly returning attention to now. Tasting his food instead of eating while staring at screens. Actually listening when people spoke, instead of planning his response. Noticing the sky, the air, the small moments that make up days. He said it was like waking up from a dream. Life had been happening all along, but he'd been missing it. And now he was here, present, actually experiencing the life he had, instead of constantly thinking about the life he would have someday. This is what the Buddha taught about present moment awareness. It's not about achieving anything or getting somewhere. It's about being where you are, fully, without escape, into mental time travel. And the extraordinary thing is that when you're truly present, many of the problems you thought you had dissolve. Right now, in this actual moment, is there a problem? Not the problem you were thinking about from yesterday, or the one you're worried might happen tomorrow. Right now, in the direct experience of this moment, is there a problem? Usually, there isn't. Usually, right now, is just this: sensations, breath, presence. The suffering is almost always about past or future, about what happened or what might happen, rarely about what actually is. This doesn't mean real difficulties don't exist. Of course they do. But even with real difficulties, You can only address them in the present moment. You can't fix yesterday. You can't solve tomorrow. You can only take action now, in this moment, with what's actually in front of you. And when you're fully present, you respond more skillfully. Your actions are clearer, more appropriate to actual conditions rather than to your fears or stories about conditions. There's another aspect of present moment awareness that's crucial: appreciation. When you're here, really here, you notice things you usually miss. The way light falls through a window, the exact expression on someone's face when they laugh, the feeling of warm water on your hands, the taste of something you've eaten 1,000 times but never really tasted. Life is unbelievably rich when you're present for it. Not because anything changes externally, but because you're finally awake to what's been here all along. And because you understand impermanence, you appreciate it more deeply. This moment with this person won't come again. This version of you, this version of them, these exact conditions, they're here now and they'll be gone soon, replaced by the next moment's different conditions. So you show up for it. You don't take it for granted. You recognize it as the unrepeatable, temporary, precious thing it is. This is what the Buddha meant by right mindfulness, samasati. Not thinking about being mindful, but actually being present, aware, awake to this moment as it is. The practice is simple enough that you can start right now. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just pause for a moment. Take one conscious breath, fully present with the in-breath, fully present with the out-breath. That's it. You've just been fully alive for one breath. Do that throughout your day, not as a technique to achieve something, but as a way of remembering where you actually are. Here, now, alive in this moment that will never come again. You don't have to be present every second of every day. That's not realistic. Your mind will wander. That's what minds do. The practice is simply noticing when you've left the present moment and gently returning. Again and again, for the rest of your life. Each return is a return to reality, to the only moment you can actually live in, to the life that's happening right now rather than the one you're remembering or imagining. And here's what's beautiful. This moment is enough. Not because it's perfect, or because nothing needs to change, but because it's real. It's the only thing that's real. Everything else is thought, and thought can't be lived. Only this can. You're not waiting for your life to begin. This is your life, beginning and ending in each moment, constantly fresh, constantly new, always right here. The tea you're drinking while thinking about work, that's your life, happening unlived. The conversation you're having while planning your response, that's your life, missed while you're somewhere else. The walk you're taking while ruminating about yesterday, That's your life, unnoticed, as you move through it, lost in thought. But when you bring attention here, when you actually taste the tea, actually listen to the person, actually feel your feet on the ground, then you're living. Then you're awake. Then you're experiencing the only thing there is to experience, this moment, just as it is. The Buddha taught this with such urgency because he understood what we forget. Impermanence means this moment matters. Your parents won't be here forever. Your children won't stay small. Your body will age and change. Everything you think is permanent is already passing, already becoming something else, already temporary. So be here now while now is. Not because you should, not because it's virtuous, but because this is where life happens. Only here, only now. All those moments you're planning to really live later, after things settle down, after you achieve your goals, after conditions are perfect, those moments never come because later never arrives. There's only ever now and now and now, each one complete in itself, each one the only reality. The cherry blossoms aren't waiting to bloom more fully later. They're here now, brief and perfect, and then they're gone. You're exactly like this, brief, temporary, and utterly precious, precisely because you won't be here forever. So take a breath. Feel it fully. Notice where you are right now. The sounds, the sensations, the simple fact of being alive in this moment. That's your life. Not later. Not when things are different. Now, be here for it. There's a fundamental war that most of us are fighting every day, and we don't even realize it. It's the war with reality itself. We wake up, and the weather isn't what we wanted. We fight it with frustration. Traffic is heavy. We fight it with impatience. Someone doesn't respond the way we hoped. We fight it with resentment. Our body aches. We fight it with resistance. Things take longer than expected. We fight it with anxiety. All day long, we're in battle with what is, insisting silently or loudly that it should be different. And this battle is exhausting, not because reality is too difficult, but because fighting reality is the very definition of a war you cannot win. The Buddha taught something radical about this. He said that most of our suffering doesn't come from what happens, it comes from our refusal to accept what happens. Remember the teaching of the 2 arrows. Let's return to it now, but look at it through the lens of acceptance. Imagine you're standing outside and a storm rolls in. Rain pours down, wind whips around you, thunder cracks overhead. This is the first arrow, the actual weather, the actual event. It's unpleasant if you're not prepared. but it's just weather doing what weather does. Now imagine standing there yelling at the sky, "This shouldn't be happening. Why is this happening to me? This is so unfair. I don't deserve this. This is ruining everything." That's the second arrow, your resistance to what's already happening. And notice something. The second arrow doesn't change the weather at all. The rain keeps falling whether you accept it or fight it. But fighting it adds a whole layer of suffering that doesn't need to be there. The weather isn't testing you. The universe isn't sending you a challenge to overcome or a lesson to learn. Weather is just weather patterns of temperature and pressure, moisture and wind, following natural laws that have nothing to do with you personally. When you stop fighting it, when you accept that yes, it's raining right now, something shifts. You can find shelter, put on a jacket, adjust your plans. You can respond skillfully to what is, instead of wasting energy demanding that reality be different. This is what acceptance actually means in Buddhist teaching. It doesn't mean you like what's happening or that you become passive in the face of difficulty. It means you stop adding suffering to pain by fighting against what's already true. Acceptance is clear seeing. It's looking at what is and acknowledging it fully. This is what's happening right now. Not this should be happening, not this shouldn't be happening, not why is this happening, just this is happening. From that clear seeing, wise action becomes possible. When you're not caught up in resistance, your energy is available for response. Your mind is clear enough to see options you couldn't see when you were busy fighting reality. Let me tell you about Rachel. She was diagnosed with a chronic illness in her 30s, something that would require daily management for the rest of her life. For the first year, she fought it constantly. She raged against the unfairness, researched obsessively looking for cures that didn't exist, pushed her body to prove it wasn't really sick, spent hours asking why this happened to her. The illness didn't change, but she was destroying herself with the second arrow, the constant war with her own body, the refusal to accept what was true. Then she encountered Buddhist teaching on acceptance. At first, she resisted it. Acceptance felt like giving up, like letting the illness win. But gradually, she began to understand the difference between acceptance and resignation. Resignation says, "Nothing matters. I give up. There's no point trying." That's not acceptance. That's defeat. Acceptance says, "This is what is true right now. I didn't choose it. I can't make it go away by wishing, and fighting it only adds more suffering. What can I do within this reality?" When Rachel finally accepted that yes, she has this illness, something remarkable happened. The constant mental anguish eased. She stopped spending all her energy fighting reality and started using it to manage her condition skillfully. She learned what helped and what didn't. She adjusted her life in sustainable ways. She found community with others who understood. The illness didn't go away. Acceptance isn't magic, and it doesn't change physical conditions that aren't changeable. But her relationship to the illness transformed completely. She found peace within unchangeable circumstances, not because the universe rewarded her acceptance, but because she stopped torturing herself with resistance. This is crucial to understand. Acceptance doesn't make external conditions better through some cosmic law of attraction. It makes your internal state clearer, which allows you to respond more skillfully to whatever conditions are present. When you accept, your mind calms. When your mind calms, you see more clearly. When you see clearly, you act more wisely. When you act wisely, you suffer less and often influence conditions in positive ways. But that's cause and effect, not cosmic reward. The Buddha said something that's often translated as, suffering is not being at peace with what is. Think about that carefully. He's not saying suffering is what happens to you. Suffering is your lack of peace with what happens to you. Two people can experience the same event and have completely different experiences of suffering. The difference isn't in what happens, it's in acceptance versus resistance. One person gets caught in rain and spends the next hour miserable, complaining, stewing in frustration. Another gets caught in the same rain and thinks, well, I'm wet now, and continues with their day. Same rain, radically different suffering. This doesn't mean the second person is superhuman or doesn't have feelings. It means they're not adding layers of resistance to what's already true. They accept what is, then deal with it. Acceptance is a practice, and like all practices, it requires repetition. You don't accept once and then you're done. You accept this moment, then the next moment brings something new to accept, and you practice again. Here's how you can start practicing right now. Notice something in your current experience that you're resisting. Maybe it's physical tension in your shoulders, tiredness, discomfort. Maybe it's emotional, anxiety, sadness, irritation. Maybe it's circumstantial, something about your situation that isn't how you want it to be. Now, instead of trying to fix it, change it, or make it go away, simply acknowledge it. This is here, right now. Not this should be here, or this shouldn't be here. Just this is here. Can you let it be exactly as it is, just for this moment? You might notice resistance to the idea of acceptance itself. That's okay. Notice that too. I'm resisting acceptance. Can I accept that? This might sound circular, but it's actually profound. You can accept your resistance, accept your difficulty accepting, accept whatever's actually present, and in that acceptance, the war starts to end. What arises from acceptance isn't cosmic reward or magical change in circumstances. What arises is wisdom, compassion, and clarity. Wisdom arises because you're seeing things as they are, rather than through the filter of how you wish they were. This clear seeing allows you to understand causes and conditions more accurately, to recognize what you can influence and what you can't. Compassion arises because when you accept your own difficulties without judgment, you naturally extend that same acceptance to others. You recognize that everyone is navigating conditions they didn't entirely choose, doing the best they can with the clarity they have. Clarity arises because resistance clouds the mind, while acceptance settles it. When you're not fighting reality, mental energy that was tied up in resistance becomes available for clear perception and wise response. There's a story about a man whose house burned down. His neighbor came to express sympathy and found him sitting in the ashes, completely at peace. "How can you be so calm?" the neighbor asked. "Your whole house just burned down." The man replied, "Yes, it did. And getting upset about it won't rebuild it. Fighting with the fact that it burned won't unburn it. So I'm accepting what's true, and from this acceptance, I'll figure out what to do next." This isn't cold indifference. He probably felt sadness, loss, shock, all natural responses to losing your home. But he wasn't adding the second arrow of resistance, of insisting reality should be different than it was. And from that acceptance, from that clear seeing of what is, he could actually begin the practical work of moving forward. His energy wasn't drained by fighting what had already happened. It was available for what needed to happen next. This is what the Buddha meant by samaditthi, right view or wise view. It's seeing reality accurately, without the distortions of desire for things to be different. It's understanding that fighting against what's already true only creates suffering without changing what's true. Right view doesn't mean you never try to change anything. It means you start from accurate perception of what is, then work skillfully with those conditions. You don't pretend circumstances are different than they are, but you also don't resign yourself to believing they can never change. There's a subtle but crucial distinction here. You accept present conditions fully. This is what's true now, while remaining open to the fact that conditions are always changing, and your actions can influence how they change. If you're in debt, acceptance means acknowledging clearly, "I owe this amount." Not fighting it, not drowning in shame about it, not pretending it's not true, just seeing it clearly. From that clear seeing, you can make a plan, take action, work with what is. If a relationship isn't working, acceptance means acknowledging the actual state of the relationship, not the one you wish existed or the one it used to be. From that honest acknowledgement, you can decide what's possible and what's needed, to work on it, to let it go, to accept it as it is, If your body is aging, acceptance means seeing that clearly without the constant fight against time. From that acceptance, you can care for the body you have rather than torturing yourself about the body you had or wish you had. Each moment of acceptance is a moment of ending the war with reality. And when the war ends, peace becomes possible, not because circumstances are perfect, but because you're not in constant conflict with what is. Try this practice throughout your day. When you notice resistance, when you catch yourself fighting against what's happening, pause and say internally, I accept this moment as it is. Not I like this moment. Not this moment is good. Not I want things to stay this way. Just I accept this moment as it is. See what happens. Often, you'll notice an immediate softening, a release of tension you didn't know you were holding. The circumstances haven't changed, but your relationship to them has. This is not cosmic surrender to some universal plan. This is simply stopping the exhausting, pointless battle with what's already true. It's redirecting the enormous energy we waste on resistance toward clear seeing and wise response. A woman once told me she resisted accepting her partner's personality traits she didn't like. She spent years trying to change him, frustrated when he stayed exactly who he was. The relationship was miserable, not because of who he was, but because she was in constant war with who he was. When she finally accepted him as he actually is, not as she wished he were, something shifted. She could see clearly whether she could be with this person as they actually are, not as she'd been trying to force them to become. From that clarity, she could make real choices about the relationship, instead of staying stuck in fantasy and frustration. Acceptance doesn't mean you have to like everything or stay in situations that don't serve you. It means you see clearly what is, and from that clear seeing, you make wise choices. The Buddha's teaching on acceptance is ultimately about ending suffering. Not by making life perfect, not by controlling all conditions, but by stopping the war we wage against reality when it doesn't match our preferences. This moment is exactly as it is. Your resistance to that fact doesn't change it. It only adds suffering to whatever's present. Your acceptance of that fact doesn't mean you're giving up on change. It means you're starting from reality rather than from fantasy. What needs to be accepted right now in your life? What reality are you fighting against that fighting won't change? Maybe it's something small, the weather, traffic, a minor frustration. Maybe it's something significant, a loss, a limitation, a situation you can't control. Whatever it is, try this. Stop fighting it, just for a moment. Let it be exactly as it is. Notice what happens in your body, in your mind, when you stop the war. You might find space you didn't know was there. Room to breathe, to think, to feel, without the added weight of resistance. energy that was tied up in fighting becomes available for living. This is the practice of acceptance, not once, but moment by moment, situation by situation, for the rest of your life. Each time you choose acceptance over resistance, you choose peace over suffering, clarity over confusion, wisdom over struggle. The circumstances won't always change, but you'll change your relationship to them. And that changes everything. Because peace isn't about having perfect circumstances. It's about ending the war with the circumstances you have. Accept this moment, not because you should, not because it makes you virtuous, but because it ends the war. And when the war ends, you can finally rest, finally see clearly, finally respond wisely to what actually is. This moment is as it is. Can you let it be? That's the practice. That's the path to peace. The war can end right now. Change terrifies most of us. We build our lives around the illusion of stability, construct entire identities around things staying the same, and then fall apart when reality refuses to cooperate. But here's what the Buddha taught as one of his most fundamental insights. Everything changes. Not most things, not some things, everything. This is called anicca in Pali, often translated as impermanence, and it's not philosophy or belief. It's observable fact. Look at anything in your experience right now. Your body is changing, cells dying and being born, breath moving in and out, sensations arising and passing. Your thoughts are changing. One moment you're focused on these words, the next, your mind wanders to something else. Your emotions are changing. What you felt an hour ago isn't what you feel now. Nothing stays still. Nothing remains fixed. Everything is in constant flux, always moving, always becoming something other than what it was a moment ago. So why do we fear this? Why does change feel like threat? It's not because we're resisting some cosmic plan or fighting the universe's intention for us. It's much simpler and more human than that. We're clinging to the illusion of permanence in a world where nothing is permanent. We meet someone and want that relationship to stay exactly as it is forever. We find success and want to freeze that moment of achievement. We have a good day and want tomorrow to be identical. We establish routines and identities and circumstances, and we desperately want them to be solid, reliable, unchanging. But the Buddha taught clearly, all conditioned phenomena are impermanent. Everything that comes together will eventually come apart. Everything that arises will cease. This isn't pessimism, it's accurate perception of how reality works. And our fear of change comes from fighting this basic truth. We're trying to make permanent what is by nature temporary, trying to hold still what is by nature flowing, trying to prevent what is inevitable. That's exhausting. That's suffering. Think about water for a moment. Water doesn't resist change. It is change. Pour it into a cup, and it becomes the shape of the cup. Pour it into a bowl, and it becomes the shape of the bowl. It flows around obstacles, finds the path of least resistance, adapts instantly to whatever conditions it encounters. This isn't because water is receiving lessons from the universe about how to be. It's simply the nature of water fluid, adaptable, responsive to conditions. Water teaches us through its nature, not through cosmic intention. We can learn from water's example, not by waiting for the universe to show us how, but by recognizing that flexibility and adaptation are natural responses to a constantly changing reality. When you hold water tightly in your fist, it escapes through your fingers. When you try to grasp it, it slips away. But when you hold it gently in cupped hands, it stays. When you work with its nature rather than against it, water becomes your ally. Life is like this. When we try to grip it tightly, to control every change, to make things stay as we want them, life slips through our fingers and we're left frustrated. But when we learn to hold things lightly, to move with change rather than against it, we find a different kind of stability. Not the stability of things staying the same, but the stability of being able to adapt to whatever comes. There's a teaching that appears in both Taoism and Buddhism about Wu Wei, often translated as effortless action or non-forcing. It doesn't mean doing nothing. It means acting in harmony with the natural flow of things, rather than constantly forcing outcomes. A tree in a storm embodies Wu Wei perfectly. The tree doesn't fight the wind, it bends. Its branches flex, its trunk sways, it moves with the force rather than rigidly resisting it. And because it bends, it doesn't break. The rigid tree, the one that refuses to move, that tries to stand exactly as it always has, regardless of conditions, that tree snaps. Its very rigidity, its resistance to change, is what destroys it. You can see this principle everywhere in nature. Animals adapt to changing seasons. Plants grow toward available light. Rivers change course when they encounter obstacles. Nature doesn't cling to how things were. It responds to how things are. We have this capacity too. You've already demonstrated it countless times in your life, even if you don't recognize it. Think back to major changes you've experienced. Moving to a new place, starting a new job, ending a relationship, losing someone important, facing unexpected challenges. At the time, many of these probably felt overwhelming, maybe even impossible to handle. But you did handle them. Not because the universe carried you through, or because some cosmic force protected you, but because you have an innate capacity to adapt. You developed resilience through direct experience of navigating difficulty. You learned by doing, by facing what came, and finding ways to continue. This is crucial to understand. You weren't saved by external forces. You saved yourself through your own capacity to adapt, to learn, to grow in response to conditions. Every change you've survived has taught you something. Every difficulty you've navigated has built strength you didn't have before. Not through divine intervention, but through the natural process of adapting to what is. A man named Robert told me about losing his job at 53, after 25 years with the same company. He said the first months were terrifying. His entire identity had been wrapped up in that role, his sense of stability completely shaken. He kept thinking, "I'm too old to start over. No one will hire me. My career is finished." But slowly, he adapted. He updated his skills, reached out to old contacts, considered options he'd never imagined before. He discovered capacities he didn't know he had because he'd never needed them: flexibility, creativity, courage to try new things. A year later, he'd started his own consulting practice, was working with clients he found fulfilling, had more freedom than he'd had in decades. He said, "I would never have chosen this change. It was painful, but I adapted, and in adapting, I became more than I was." That's not the universe having a plan for him. That's a human being responding to changing conditions with the remarkable adaptability we all possess. You can trust this capacity in yourself. Not blind trust, not faith in something external, but trust based on evidence. Every time before this, when conditions changed, you found a way to adapt. You learned, you grew, you continued. This doesn't mean change is easy or that you won't struggle. It means you have direct knowledge, through lived experience, that you can meet change even when it's difficult. And here's something important about impermanence that often gets overlooked: the difficult change you're experiencing right now. It's also impermanent. Whatever challenge you're facing, whatever loss you're grieving, whatever uncertainty you're sitting with, it will change. Not because you deserve relief, or because the universe will eventually give you a break, but because change is the nature of all conditioned things. Nothing stays the same, including difficulty. This isn't cold comfort. It's liberating. You don't have to fix everything right now. Don't have to force change to happen faster. Don't have to panic that this is permanent. You can work with conditions as they are, while knowing that conditions are always shifting. There's a practice in Buddhism of reflecting on impermanence deliberately, not to depress yourself, but to reduce clinging. You can try this right now. Look around at your environment. Everything you see will eventually change form. The furniture will wear out. The walls will need repainting. The objects you own will break, or be given away, or outlast you. None of it is permanent. Think about the people in your life. Everyone you know, everyone you love, is changing, moment by moment, aging, learning, becoming different than they were yesterday. These relationships will all change too, through distance or transformation, or eventually death. Nothing stays the same. Notice your own body and mind. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago, 1 year ago, even 1 hour ago. Your thoughts are different. Your body is different. Your understanding is different. You are process, not fixed entity, constantly becoming, never static. This reflection isn't meant to make you sad. It's meant to help you hold everything more lightly, to appreciate what's here while it's here, to stop clinging so desperately to things remaining unchanged. When you deeply understand impermanence, two things happen. First, you appreciate the present moment more fully because you recognize it won't last. This conversation, this meal, this phase of life, it's here now and it will pass. So you pay attention, you show up, you don't take it for granted. Second, you fear change less because you understand it's not an aberration or a problem. It's simply how things are. Change isn't happening to you personally as punishment or challenge. Change is the fundamental nature of reality, and you're part of that reality, flowing with everything else. This is why flexibility is such a valuable quality to cultivate. Not flexibility as weakness or lack of principles, but flexibility as the ability to respond skillfully to changing conditions without breaking. You can have deep values and still be flexible in how you express them. You can have clear goals and still be flexible about the path to reach them. You can know who you are and still be flexible enough to grow and change. The bamboo bends in the wind, but doesn't break. The willow's branches touch the ground in a storm and then rise again. They survive not through rigidity, but through flexibility, through working with change rather than resisting it. You have this same capacity. You've proven it already through every change you've navigated, every adaptation you've made, every time you've bent without breaking. The next time, change comes, and it will come because change is constant. You can meet it with less fear. Not because you know everything will work out perfectly, but because you know you have the capacity to adapt, to learn, to continue growing, even through difficulty. This knowing comes from experience, not faith. It's built on the direct evidence of your own life, all the times you thought you couldn't handle change and then you did. All the times you felt broken by circumstances and then discovered you could bend and rise again. Impermanence means everything changes, including you, including your capacity to meet change, including this very moment of difficulty or uncertainty you might be experiencing. Water flows, trees bend, seasons turn, everything moves, everything shifts, everything becomes something new. This is not something to fear. This is the very nature of being alive. You can fight it, resist it, try to make things stay the same, and exhaust yourself in a battle you cannot win. Or you can learn to move with it, adapt to it, flow with the changing conditions while maintaining your core integrity. That's the wisdom of impermanence. Not that everything falls apart, but that everything flows. And you can learn to flow with it, trusting not in cosmic plans, but in your own proven capacity to adapt, to grow, to continue becoming. The next change is coming, and it will pass too, like everything else. Like everything always has, you'll adapt. You always have. There are moments in every life when the path forward isn't clear. You don't know which direction to take, what decision to make, how things will unfold. The future is fog, and you can barely see a step ahead, let alone the destination. Most spiritual teachings tell you to trust in these moments. Trust the universe. Trust that you're being guided. Trust that there's an invisible hand leading you to where you need to be. But the Buddha taught something different. Something more honest, more empowering, and ultimately more trustworthy. He taught that not knowing is okay. That uncertainty is not a problem to solve, but a reality to accept. That you don't need a cosmic guide because you can develop your own capacity to walk skillfully even when you can't see far ahead. This is called beginner's mind in Zen, approaching each moment fresh, without pretending you know what you don't know, without clinging to false certainty. Imagine you're walking through dense fog early in the morning. You can see maybe 10 feet in front of you, no more. You can't see your destination, can't see the full path, can't even see what's waiting just beyond the edge of visibility. You have two choices. You can stand frozen, afraid to move because you can't see where you're going. Or you can take the next step that you can see, then the next, trusting not that someone is guiding your feet, but that you have the capacity to walk carefully, to pay attention, to adjust as conditions reveal themselves. This is practice. This is the path. Not knowing where it leads, but walking it anyway, with attention and care. A woman named Lisa told me about leaving a successful career in law to pursue music, something she'd loved her whole life, but had set aside for practical reasons. Everyone around her thought she was making a terrible mistake. She had no clear path, no guarantee of success, no map from corporate attorney to working musician. She said the uncertainty was terrifying. She kept waiting for a sign, for clarity, for some confirmation that she was making the right choice. But nothing came, except the fog of not knowing. Then she stopped waiting for external guidance and started practicing. She took music classes, joined a band, played small venues, taught students, one step at a time, not because she could see where it would lead, but because these were the steps visible to her. 5 years later, she supports herself through music, but not in the way she imagined. She teaches, performs occasionally, does session work, composes for small projects. It doesn't look like the career she envisioned, and if she demanded that specific outcome, she would have failed. But she didn't fail into this life. Conditions ripened differently than expected. She responded to opportunities as they appeared, adapted to circumstances as they unfolded, kept practicing, even when the path wasn't clear. That's not the universe guiding her. That's a person walking skillfully through fog, paying attention, taking the steps she could see, trusting her practice, rather than waiting for providence. This kind of trust is fundamentally different from the trust most spiritual teachings promote. It's not faith in something outside yourself. It's confidence that grows from direct experience of practice working. In Buddhism, this is called saddha, often translated as faith, but it doesn't mean blind belief. Saddha is confidence born from seeing cause and effect directly in your own life. You practice mindfulness and notice your mind becomes calmer. You practice generosity and notice your heart opens. You practice ethical conduct and notice relationships improve. This isn't about believing in doctrines or trusting in unseen forces. It's about verifying through your own experience that certain practices lead to certain results, then developing confidence in those practices based on evidence. The Buddha himself said, "Don't believe what I teach because I said it, or because it's traditional, or because it sounds good. Test it in your own experience. See if it actually reduces suffering and increases well-being. Trust what you can verify directly, not what you're told to believe." This is radical. Most religions ask for faith first, evidence later, maybe in another life, maybe after death, maybe never. Buddhism says, practice first, verify directly, develop confidence from what you see actually working. In Buddhist teaching, there's a framework called the 3 jewels, or 3 refuges, 3 things you can trust when everything else is uncertain. The first is the Buddha, not as a god to worship, but as an example of what's possible. A human being who woke up completely, who found the end of suffering, who showed that this is possible for others too. You trust that awakening is real because someone demonstrated it. The second is the Dharma, the teachings themselves. Not as dogma to follow blindly, but as a map tested by countless practitioners over 2,500 years. You trust these teachings because you can verify them yourself, because when you apply them, they work. The third is the Sangha, the community of practitioners. Not as authority figures who have all the answers, but as companions on the path who share practice, support each other's efforts, and demonstrate through their lives that the teachings work. Notice what's not in this list: the universe, fate, cosmic plans, divine guidance. The Buddha offered things you could actually test, verify, and develop confidence in through direct experience. And most importantly, there's a fourth refuge that's sometimes called the ultimate refuge: trust in yourself. Not trust that you're perfect or have all the answers, but trust that you have the capacity to practice, to learn, to grow, to wake up. Trust that through sustained effort and clear seeing, you can develop wisdom and compassion. Trust that you don't need to be saved from outside. You have what's needed for the path. This self-trust isn't arrogance. It's recognizing your own Buddha nature, the potential for awakening that exists in everyone. It's understanding that while teachers can point the way and community can support you, ultimately, you have to walk the path yourself, see truth yourself, free yourself. This brings us to something subtle but important: how trust actually feels in the body. Most people, when they talk about trusting the universe, describe a feeling of being held, supported from outside, carried by something bigger than themselves. And that feeling can be comforting until circumstances change, and suddenly you feel dropped, abandoned, unsupported. But trust in practice feels different. It feels like inner stability, not because nothing bad will happen, but because you know you have tools to work with whatever arises. It's groundedness that comes from within, rather than support you. Imagine coming from outside. Try this right now. Close your eyes or soften your gaze and bring attention to your body. Ask yourself, where do I feel groundedness? Where do I feel solid, stable, connected to earth? Maybe it's in your feet, if you're standing, your sit bones, if you're seated, your back against a surface. Maybe it's in your belly, your breath, your bones. Just notice where stability lives in your direct experience. Now ask, where do I feel groundlessness? Where is there uncertainty, floating, lack of solid reference? Maybe it's in your chest, your throat, your head, places where anxiety or fear often register. Neither of these is wrong. Groundedness and groundlessness often coexist. But noticing the difference helps you distinguish between actual stability, your embodied sense of being able to meet what comes, and the grasping for external support that creates instability. When you trust in practice, you can feel groundlessness and not panic. You can acknowledge, I don't know what's next. I can't see clearly. The path is uncertain. And you can also feel, I have my breath. I have this moment. I have practices that work. I can take the next step even without knowing where the path leads. This is softer than demanding certainty, more honest than pretending confidence you don't feel, and more stable than depending on imagined external support. A man named David described, practicing with uncertainty during a health crisis. He didn't know if treatment would work, didn't know what his future held, lived in a state of profound not knowing for months. He said at first he kept looking for reassurance from outside, from doctors, from friends, from spiritual teachings that promised everything would work out. But nothing could give him the certainty he craved, because certainty wasn't available. Then he started practicing with the groundlessness itself. Instead of trying to escape it or cover it with false confidence, he turned toward it. This is what not knowing feels like. This tightness in my chest, this shakiness, this fear, this is groundlessness. And alongside that, he practiced connecting with what was actually stable, this breath, right now. This moment which I'm in. My capacity to be present even with fear. My practice, which I can return to again and again. The uncertainty didn't go away. Uncertainty was the reality of his situation. But he found a way to be with it that wasn't constantly fighting it or needing it to be different. He developed trust, not in outcomes, but in his capacity to practice, regardless of outcomes. That's the trust Buddhism points to. Not trust that everything will be fine, but trust that you can meet whatever comes with increasing skill, wisdom, and compassion. This kind of trust grows slowly, through repeated experience. You practice sitting with discomfort and discover you can do it. You practice observing difficult emotions without being destroyed by them. You practice making wise choices, even when you're afraid. Each time, your confidence grows, not in external support, but in your own capacity. This is why the Buddha emphasized practice so much. Not belief, not worship, not hoping for divine intervention, practice. Actual training of mind and heart through repeated effort that produces verifiable results. You practice mindfulness and attention sharpens. You practice patience and reactivity lessens. You practice compassion and your heart softens toward yourself and others. You see these changes directly, not through faith, but through evidence, and that evidence builds trust in the path itself. When the way forward is unclear, when you're walking through fog, when you don't know what's next, this is when trust in practice matters most. You can't trust in a clear plan because there isn't one. You can't trust in certainty because uncertainty is the reality. But you can trust that your practices work, that paying attention helps, that taking the next step with awareness is better than freezing or running blindly. You can trust that you've navigated uncertainty before and developed capacity through it. You can trust that conditions will continue changing, which means this fog will eventually clear, even as new fog forms elsewhere. You can trust that you're not alone. Others have walked through not knowing and found their way, not through cosmic guidance, but through practice. Most importantly, You can trust this moment. Not the imagined future, not the remembered past, but this actual moment where you can feel your breath, can sense your body, can be present with what is. This moment might be uncomfortable, uncertain, full of not knowing, but it's real, it's here, and you can meet it. That's not faith in something outside yourself. That's confidence in your capacity to be present, which is the foundation of all practice. So when the path is unclear, when you can't see where you're going, when uncertainty is all you have, don't wait for signs from the universe. Don't demand clarity before moving. Don't freeze in fear of making wrong choices. Instead, trust your practice. Take the step you can see. Pay attention to this moment. Notice groundedness alongside groundlessness. Walk through the fog with beginner's mind, not knowing where it leads, but trusting that you can walk skillfully, even without knowing. The Buddha's final teaching before he died was this: be a lamp unto yourself. Don't look for external authority. Don't depend on being guided from outside. Don't wait for someone or something else to show you the way. Develop your own light through practice, through direct seeing, through verified experience. Trust that light, even when it only illuminates a few steps ahead. Trust your capacity to walk those steps with awareness and care. That's the trust that doesn't fail when circumstances change, that doesn't depend on faith in unseen forces, that grows stronger through every moment you practice. Trust in practice, not providence. Trust in your capacity, not cosmic plans. Trust what you can verify, not what you're told to believe. That's the path through the fog. You've been on a journey through these teachings, but here's the truth the Buddha pointed to. The journey is the destination. There's nowhere to get to because you're already here, already complete, already possessing everything you need for practice. You are not behind. You never were. The idea that you're late, that you've missed something, that you should be further along, that's just thought, arising and passing like everything else. Everything conditioned is impermanent. Your struggles, your waiting, your uncertainty. All of it changes. All of it passes. All of it arose from conditions and will cease when conditions change. But through all that change, one thing remains: your capacity to practice, to be present, to meet each moment with awareness. This capacity isn't something you need to earn or wait for the universe to grant you. It's your Buddha nature, the awakeness that's already here, sometimes obscured, but never absent, always available in this very moment. The freedom you've been waiting for. It's not in perfect circumstances or cosmic timing. It's in recognizing what the Buddha taught. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. You found these teachings when conditions aligned, your search, your readiness, this moment. Now you can practice with what you've heard. Rest when you need to. Return when you're ready. If it feels right, share one word in the comments about how you feel right now. Let's create connection through this simple practice. May you be at peace with this moment, just as it is.